time to bring on board the Rise with India market champion, and it's none other than market veteran Vallabh Bhansali, the chairman of Enam Group. He joins us on the show right now. Mr. Bhansali, just such a pleasure speaking with you today. And you know, when one talks about Rise with India, it has to be you that one needs to get on board to talk about really how the journey of India has been and equity markets along with it. And you know, just looking at the GDP numbers, they have come in at about what, 4 times in the last 8 years, yet the average Indian is having that left out feeling. Why do you think there is such a feeling with the mass market?
Well, I don't think that they have not participated. Maybe they have not participated to the extent that some of us would like. Because you go to any social place, the way they dress, the way their confidence is, the way they demand their rights as consumers, their aspirations, I think there is a completely different sense of freedom, hope and dream. And therefore, I don't buy that theory that they have not participated at all. Yes, indeed, given the fact that some of us have done so well that the divergence seems to be greater. And that's also, you know, happens in a freer society. So, I think what we have to see is that where are the obstacles that faster growth can happen. So, I would begin on a slightly more positive note than you, and that still leaves the room for discussion as to how do we do it.
So, morning Mr. Bhansali, pleasure to have you back on ET Now. So, Mr. Bhansali, so how can an average Indian bet on the India story and rise with it?
Sure. So, I think the meaning of economic freedoms has to be understood more deeply at both ends, at the policymaker's ends or at the institution's ends and at the consumer end. And what does that mean? So, for example, we have seen campaigns that how savers have to become investors and how you can use technology to improve you know, your life. Mr. Narayan Murthy recently gave a wonderful example at a private function. And he said that, look, when the first ATM was installed at Infosys, he was standing in a queue with, you know, somebody who used to clean his room. And they got chatting. He said that, look, you know, we have a new dabba in our office. Have you used it? And this cleaning boy said, yes, sir, I have used it. Now, he said, look at this fantastic thing, that the dabba did not ask him that who he was, what was his background. So, this was, you know, really including people, benefiting them in that sense. So, how technology can be used, how the various rights that we have, whether from RTI to education to various subsidies, now insurance program, pension programs, how they can be taken to all the people. And I think some general hand holding which channels like you hope to be you know, doing, that look, you know, it is a lot easier than they might think to access all these benefits. And on the other hand, I think the corporates and the governments can also probably roll out programs. And therefore, I think if you ask me, I think there are enough schemes, there is enough consciousness, there are enough platforms. Popularizing them, you know, streamlining them, debugging them, etc. I think that is what is necessary.
Mr. Bhansali, great to have you on the show. Even though, you know, deep-rooted reforms have taken place on an administrative level and at the operational side, India's GDP is, it's not contracting, it's really, you know, scaled down a bit. I mean, the last Q1 GDP numbers were a surprise and earnings have yet to pick up. Why is there that disconnect?
If you go back into the past, you will say that economic reforms when rolled out in 91, 92, 93, certain industries took off. A lot of them ran into difficulty. And then, you know, there were second line of sectors like IT, etc., which were not very visible in terms of the impact they will make. And therefore, you know, that became visible towards the end of 90s. But you know that towards the end of 90s, a lot of the traditional companies were in serious difficulty. And, you know, we had to do corporate debt restructuring and so on. So, I think this is a rotational play that is taking place even today, that there are, you know, certain segments of sectors, certain scale companies, a lot of startups, a lot of smaller companies, a lot of companies on the service sector side, they are doing well. But there are, the traditional sector that are we putting up steel smelter, aluminum smelters, are you putting up, large cement plants, etc. I think that may not be happening. But if you look at the growth in services sector, take for example, if road building has gone from 4 kilometers per day to 14 kilometers per day, something must be happening. If railway track laying has gone up similarly, something must be happening. And they must be providing, businesses must be at least getting occupation, if not profitability. That depends upon competition. So I see it's a mixed picture. And there is the time cycle, precise time cycle is not easy to predict in an economy as it becomes more complex. So if you see US, for example, between 2008 and 2014, a lot changed. The confidence changed tremendously. But maybe, investment side, except for the shale gas, you didn't really see no auto plant came up, no semiconductor plant came up. But in the meantime, the services companies grew, and Apple and Amazon and things like that. So I think when the nature of economy changes, some of these old measures may not capture the change and growth immediately. So I think the headline numbers I read every day, but when I go around the country, when I meet particularly smaller businessmen, some of them who are entering the business, I find a different picture. Some of the established trading communities, manufacturing communities, they seem to be more complaining. But if you look at their families, you look at their lifestyle, I don't see any misery or any real stress. So I think it's a mixed picture to me, and I don't have the data to really convey a more solid feeling than I am able to at this stage. But my conviction is that things are better than what the headlines say, because they are distributed, they are in newer areas.
Right. So is the entrepreneurship of India suddenly broken down, IT losing jobs, pharma is in a disarray, and private capex is yet to pick up, and sector after sector, it's coming under pressure? Or would you not agree with this view?
No, I don't agree. Say, for example, just take healthcare. I think the potential to roll out healthcare in India, I think for the next 30 years you can keep doing. Similarly, education, and we haven't paid enough attention. Education, another area. Take agriculture and farming. Typically, that is being catered to by the government sector, which unfortunately is not always the most efficient. But if you took upon, if there was a way of doing it, and some people are attempting, and I'm trying to do my bit in that area, that how better soil testing, how better distribution, storage, irrigation, etc. can be done, I think our productivity can grow tremendously, jobs can be created, we can retain the rural population back in villages and give them a better life. So I think sector after sector, if I take for example education, while a lot of money is allocated to this sector, we are not seeing impact. If someone, just as what we saw in coal sector, that Coal India suddenly, grew its production by 30%, and it altered the economics of the country. So similarly, if we, we were to go about saying that how do we bring the impact into education sector, and you will find that there is potential to grow large number of, there's a potential for large employment and a large impact. So I think it is the social sector, infrastructure sector, where there are large opportunities which can be abiding for the next 15-20 years.
Fair point, Mr. Bhansali, but for a vibrant economy, the most important aspect is a vibrant jobs market. And you look at the headlines there, many are calling this economic growth a jobless one. With lack of job creation, do you think that sooner or later it will haunt us and our economic growth momentum?
Well, whether it is the biggest point or not, it's definitely a very significant area to look at, particularly in a young country like ours. And I think we all need to pay attention, but for job creation, we must have a free market, and that free market also means free from fear market. So I think as our tax laws become simpler, I think GST has done a great amount already. Some of the tax reforms that we hear are in the air regarding income tax, that the assessee will be assessed remotely, so there will not be no local income tax office to assess. and so on. So I think that ease of doing business, once that improves, and this is the best that job employment job employment creation can be, or the job creation can be done, is to really create an environment of freedom. Anytime you try and create artificial jobs, there is always a fear that you will create a depression also at some point of time. So the government has definitely upped its expenditure, which is what a government can do, and it's not going into fortunately into digging holes, but creating real assets and purposeful projects. So I think we will have to do it in that manner. What I really lament and regret is that the research in creating jobs in the unorganized, the so-called unorganized sector, which is half the economy, which is farming and animal husbandry and small jobs and things like that, we don't have enough data. And if you don't have data, you don't have enough ideas to bring about change. So I think that's one area that I would point that a lot should be done. Very interesting moves that have happened is that apprenticeship is picking up. So I think some of the companies, you may not be right to mention them, but they are ready to take on large number of people, train them, and give them short-term jobs, which give them greater employability. So I mean, the other ironical aspect of what you are saying is that there are hundreds of thousands of jobs which are not being filled because we don't have the right skill. So I think while what needs to be done has been identified, we need to go about doing a lot of them, which is skilling, apprenticeship, unorganized sector, social sectors like education and healthcare. So we need serious thinking, just as this government has put its mind on areas like GST and such similar things. India unfortunately has a long roster of things still to be done.
Mr. Bhansali, on paper we can prove that demonetization in the short term has been a failure. Now what happens in the long term, whether it changes the black money culture or not, it's still debatable. But as of now, the grain of the truth here is that against expectations, bulk of the black money has come back into the system. So in the long term it may be a success or not, we don't know, but in the short term it's clearly a failure.
I think, as you rightly said, that time will show that what the long-term benefit is from a move like that. But when you're a reform-minded person and when you're determined to deal with some very deep-rooted scourges in our society, and this scourge was not only post-independence, but it has been in our society for a long period of time, you have to show your determination and you have to take a chance with some of these things. So I think in terms of long-term digitalization of the economy, long-term tax implication of demonetization, also identification, while some people thought that there may be a windfall gain, and that windfall gain would have been would have come along with a stigma also that, oh, people lost their money. So let's not get into that, but I think every rupee now has an address, and that has, I think, great value. If you look at the deposits that have continued to languish in the banks, it shows that a lot of money entered the system, it's not gone out of the system. And that's the reason that RBI has started to cut rates also, because there is so much money in the economy and there is no pickup on credit. So I think a large amount of, or a very good benefit that came to us is that every single rupee now has an address. We know where it has come from, and that data is very significant.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/ETNow.